episode. So, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Fundamental Escape. I'm here today with a stand-up comedian, a podcaster. What's your podcast? It's called The Shooting Stars, right?
You got it, yep.
Yeah, so Elliott Morgan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to connect. So, we were just talking off air, obviously, about our mutual acquaintance, Peter Rollins. That's how I discovered your videos, and then found that
Yes.
you were interesting on your own without him. And
Oh, thank you. I try to be. Well, like I was saying, I like to steal a lot of his stuff and inject it into my own stuff as much as possible. So he gives me a lot of material.
Yeah.
Some of it's even from his work. Most of it's just from the way he acts. So.
He's a very interesting guy. He's very interesting. So I'm curious, I want to sort of banter a little bit about this whole churchy stuff, because we both grew up in the church, and I think you talk about it a little bit in your videos, like not too much, but it does crop up from time to time.
Yeah. It's all fun, man. I try to not talk about it too much, only because it's not as relatable as people may think. I mean, I kind of am part of the world of the, I guess, what would be described as the emergent church. I'm not saying that I'm a voice for it, but like I enjoy those voices in the emergent church. People like Rob Bell and
he's great. I've had him on the podcast as well. He's great.
Awesome, and that kind of thing. But I that's such a subculture that I like being a part of. But when I talk about it, in my videos and then in stand-up, it's a little less relatable just because, the majority of people didn't grow up like that. But for me, it's fascinating, so it works out.
I think it is. I guess you're right that it is not necessarily relatable to everyone, but I think it's interesting to people, and I'm noticing it more and more. There seems to be this, emergence, I guess you could say, of people who are coming out, people of faith, and there is a fascination. There's a guy at the moment, I'm not sure if you've heard of him. His name's Jordan Peterson. He's a Canadian. I'm actually working on getting him on the show later in the year, hopefully. He just sat down with Sam Harris, and they had a really. Did you listen to that by chance?
I haven't listened to it yet. I know it's so funny. It's funny you mentioned. Because my cousin who lives in Utah, we were talking recently and about stuff, and he mentioned Jordan Peterson, and I was like, well, who? He was like, have you heard of this guy? And I was like, no, I don't think I have. And then I Googled him, and I was like, oh yeah, I fell into a YouTube wormhole of watching him kind of debate social justice warriors and all that. And I have a real sick pleasure watching social justice warrior videos online. They're usually horribly edited, and they're oftentimes just so ridiculous, but man, they scratch a very vindictive itch in me. So they're a fun way to pass time. But that's how I came across Jordan Peterson. So I know very little about him, but that's the extent of it. Enough to know that he seems cool. Yeah, no,
he's interesting because it's funny because he sort of got he got notoriety through this whole transgender pronoun thing. That's how he kind of came to the forefront. But then you sort of realize he's this philosopher, and he's really deep and interesting, and he's he's on the Joe Rogan podcast as well, which is amazing.
Yep.
So going back to the whole religion thing, you talked about the emergent stuff as well. I started reading a lot of those sort of books, say 2008-9 sort of thing. But did you grow up in a sort of evangelical church as well, though, right?
Yeah, I grew up evangelical, Pentecostal, Assemblies of God, Christian. So whatever, I think Assemblies of God was the proper term, but I'm not really sure the difference between that and Pentecostal.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Speaking in tongues, that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I can relate.
It was during this thing called my childhood was. It was in I grew up in the 90s, and I grew up as part of a mega church, but it was a mega church that ended up having a church split because of a scandal where, if my memory serves me correctly, the pastor's wife was accused of being in a seance. And I don't know if you were aware during the time, but the occult was the next big scary thing that that fundamentalist Christians were mostly concerned about, and or very concerned about, and Frank Peretti and all that. And I loved Frank Peretti. But anyway, I grew up during the Laughter Revival that kind of brought a new life into this megachurch after the split happened from a guy named Rodney Howard Brown. And so I specifically remember being like, 8 years old, and then being slain in the spirit is the terminology that was used. But I remember it vividly, and it happened a couple different times.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me through life. And then I did the whole rigmarole. I went to church on Sunday mornings and then Wednesday evenings, and youth group on Wednesday evenings. I preached when I was in middle school and went on missions trips. And I bought the whole thing.
Yeah, no, that sounds very similar to the environment I grew up in as well.
Nice.
Well, I
had no idea where. So are you? I mean, and obviously we're just meeting now. So like, and I don't want to have you repeat stuff that your listeners
no,
already heard,
good,
but like,
that's
what's
fine.
your background?
Yeah, so I grew up in the church. Like I would say an evangelical bubble. I guess I went to like a Christian school, like the whole deal. I like growing up as a teenager, I only listened to like Christian music and all that kind of stuff. And so after high school, I was very evangelical. I got into like street evangelism. So that's how serious I was about
Nice.
my faith. So I did that for a number of years, and that's what I was keen to ask you, because that's where I kind of had this crash, and I've talked about it. Like, I mean, given I talked to you about how I appreciate your honesty in your videos, I sort of feel like I want to be mutually honest about some stuff. I've talked about different things as well, but I've had like some mental health issues and stuff like that. So I had a kind of big crash in 2008 after doing things like evangelism for a number of years. And that's where, like, I felt like, everything was pulled out from underneath me. Like, I had this, like, perfect, like, view of the world. Like, these are the good people, these are the bad people. It's like heaven or hell kind of thing, And then that all just kind of crumbled, and you're just like, oh my gosh. And that's where, like, I stumbled across people like Peter Rollins and Brian McLaren and different people. And I was like, oh, there is room here. Like, that's what I appreciated. And that's kind of what I see in you as well, which I find you really fascinating, because you're like, you seem to be, with your videos, like, I know you did that video, we might jump all over the place, but that's fine.
No, go for
it. You did that video where you were, I think you ran a poll on Twitter about what people think you are, like whether you were like I can't remember all the options, like a blue-haired social justice warrior.
Blue-haired social justice warrior.
God-fearing Republican or something.
Yeah, some kind of right-wing something or other, and then there was like Marxist piece of shit,
yeah.
And then there was not delusional, but like out of touch.
Yeah.
Well-intentioned libertarian or something.
Yeah,
I tried to use categories that kind of insulted the labels as much as possible.
So,
And then I kind of went through and explained, where I get my stuff from.
I do want to get into that whole like identity politics and stuff, but just to wrap this up, I guess, like with your experience of like being in the church and everything, like how do you view it now? Like, was there a significant moment, or like what was it that kind of led you out of that to where you are now? Like, was there kind of like, was it a long process, or was it kind of like, this doesn't work for me anymore, or you just started seeing things differently? Like, can you kind of talk through that?
I think divorce was probably the biggest one, and going through, having a life that I had built that was a product of, a number of decisions that I'd made, and I kind of, everything kind of felt a little bit like I never tapped the brakes and was like, hey, what do I actually think about everything? So I hesitate to use this term because it sounds very dramatic and it sounds very like, woe is me, but I would equate it most closely to being like a crisis. Definitely existential crisis would probably be the most accurate, but it was almost like a willing existential crisis. I mean, I certainly did a fair share to cause it, but then in the aftermath, through divorce and through ongoing like therapy and then meditation and all these things, it was kind of a slow burn, but definitely going through every stage. Like I went through, even as a kid, I had doubts about a number of the things in modern day Christianity, but I maintained a belief, largely I think because of this the laughter revival thing.
Yeah, we went through it. We had that here in New Zealand too, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, Dude, it's crazy because when you're a kid, it's like Santa Claus, it's like anything else. Like, you believe what's presented to you. And I was actually like, I've talked about it before, but like, not a lot, but like, it was always so difficult for me to be like, well, I don't believe this anymore, because I had that experience, that very weird experience with the Laughter Revival. And then it was kind of like, oh, that was essentially what this was, and it was and I couldn't make sense of it. But for 20-something years, I could never make sense of it, so I always felt this immense guilt for even questioning my worldview.
I totally get that. I totally resonate with that, like, incredibly. It's I could definitely, experiences come to mind where you just like, you can't, and that's the limitation of language as well. You can't articulate, and that's what I find like quite problematic with like atheism in a sense, because it's like tries to reduce everything down to like precise language, and it doesn't seem to account for like mystery and unknownness and uncertainty. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like,
oh yeah. I know exactly what you mean. I would never say I'd love to be an atheist. Atheism sounds really cool. But I don't think I ever could be an atheist, only because it seems a little too like you're saying, kind of cut and dry, and like, all right, this is, it just seems like, oh, you figured it out. And I think I would much rather live a life, where I don't figure it out. Like, that kind of terrifies me. That said, I also don't want to not have convictions, which is something in the political spectrum that I struggle with. But I definitely think that there's,
it's funny.
In atheism, fundamentalism is still there too.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think this is like a Peter Rollins quote as well, where he talks about how atheism, in its absolute rejection of religion and its focus on religion to sort of deconstruct it, it ends up mirroring it.
Yes. Very much so. Yeah. I would agree with that. And it's also just such a boring thing. I mean, I love Sam Harris, and it just seems like you're closing yourself off to a lot of fun conversations when you are all of a sudden like, this is what it is, and this is, you can't, when you start, I think one of the positive things about growing up in an evangelical environment and then sort of exiting from it is you learn the value of nuance. And I think that a lot of new atheism doesn't get nuance. And it's a lesson that people who have exited evangelical Christianity know already. And it's an area, I think, where there could be a lot of common ground. With conversations in atheism, or conversations with atheists, but who knows?
Well, I guess it can work both ways, not just with atheism exclusively, I guess, but when you hang your hat on this idea that a lot of the debate in the back and forth seems to just come down to somebody who just wants to concede the point that they're right at the end of the day. Like, you just can't go anywhere with that, there's no like sort of basic level of humility where it's like, I could be wrong here, And that's interesting. You brought up the word conviction, which I'm really glad you brought up that concept, because it's been something. It's been on my mind of late, and it's something when I started watching people like Jordan Peterson, I was like, this guy. That's the word I kind of associate with him. I was like, this guy's got conviction, like. And it seems like we live in this world. I want to dive into this whole social justice warrior kind of politics stuff, because I know you're interested in this stuff. But yeah, it seems like we're kind of in this social climate where nobody believes anything. It's like you can just follow on Twitter and subscribe and tick the right boxes, and I guess having the faith background as I did, you'd probably notice it as well. Like, there seems to be this real, like it has a religious feel to it. Like, there's doctrines that you have to adhere to, and if you, there was a girl that's recently she's come out with a documentary called The Red Pill. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. Her name's Cassie J. She was a feminist for like 10 years. Well, she identified as a feminist for like 10 years or whatever, and she went to make a documentary on the men's rights movement. And essentially she went in like expecting animosity and like misogyny and all this kind of stuff, and she just had this like, it was like a 3-year process of making, and she just had this dramatic, like, by the end of the documentary, she actually drops the label feminist, and it's incredible. Like,
Wow.
Yeah, but basically, she had made a number of documentaries before that. She'd done one on, like, gay rights and things like that, and so she was pretty accepted in the liberal church, I guess you could say.
Right.
And yeah, as soon as people saw where she was going with this documentary, like, all her funding dried up and everything like that. And it was actually Milo Yiannopoulos who picked up on the story on Breitbart, and she was doing like a Kickstarter campaign and everything, and she ended up getting all the funds in like 3 days or something ridiculous. And
nice.
That's what happens when Milo steps.
Right. He's got that golden.
Yeah, I guess since his name was inevitably going to come up, because I know you've talked about him a little bit on some of your videos. When did you come across his stuff just by chance?
Milo, I was doing a show on a channel called SourceFed, which is where I kind of got my start, and we did a little experimental thing for a couple seasons where I did a show that was a weekly news show where I was trying to be like an evil Stephen Colbert. So I made this character called Elliott Morgan, who was this filthy rich, detached, contractually obligated, kind of alt-right person who would say alt-right jokes, some of which I agreed with, not the alt-right that's commonly used by the left, but like the Milo Yiannopoulos ideas, or I would subtly incorporate just jabs at the left, but I didn't realize that this fake character that I made was very much like Milo. And then I found Milo. I saw some speeches that he was doing, and it was kind of we connected at some point over Twitter, and then never connected again because he blew up, which is great for him, I guess.
Yeah.
And he was killing it, but I would still love to have certain conversations with him. I wish he would stick more to facts, because he's so good at that, and he's so good at having
it's become like performance art now, eh?
Yeah, it's gotten a little crazy, yeah, and it's gotten the provocateur thing is fine, but you have to really, really believe that being a provocateur will have substantial change. I'll just go with the easy word. I'm trying to sound smart.
No, it's fine.
Do that. Yeah, try to use big words.
Yeah.
But then he. I don't remember exactly how I found him, but I thought it was so funny that I'd made this guy who was ironically making jokes that Milo was sincerely making.
Yeah.
Well, but yeah, I have no real opinion on Milo. I'm pretty detached from that end of the political spectrum now. For a while, especially before the election, I was like, these people are speaking some points that no one is really listening to them on, being that kind of version of the right, but then after the election, it seems like everybody now has freaked out on them, and I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, because I amazingly had the chance. I did a podcast with him in December 2015.
Nice.
This was just before he blew up, so the timing was incredible. Yeah. I had a friend of mine who was pretty clued into all that conversation and stuff, and he started sending me these clips on YouTube where he'd be Milo would be on Sky News in the UK or whatever, and I was just absolutely enamored. I'm actually sitting. I've got one of his his merchandise. I've got. He brought out a coffee mug, and he called it. It's called the Smug, and it's just got it's got a photo of him. I think it's in the Hollywood Hills, and he's just wearing this flowery shirt and holding up a cigarette.
Well, he's a beautiful man. Yeah, I don't agree with a lot of his sort of meanness. I think I kind of take issue with, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of there's some self-referential stuff, but his ability to get under the skin of people is entertaining.
Well, I think it's. I almost use religious language. I almost think to some degree, and I'm not trying to sanctify everything he does, and I'm kind of getting out of the phase right now of just but I almost think it's prophetic in a way. I would almost use that word. I think it's interesting to see, because when he spoke to me, he brought up, because I said about how I picked up on this, because he often, some of the subjects he'll talk about are things like male suicide, for example, these topics that nobody else wants to sort of touch. Yeah. And I did pick up on a very deep level of empathy on certain things. I was like, this guy's having fun, and I think a lot of people see that, but I at least in my opinion, but I was like, picked up on this kind of empathy that I don't think everyone sees. They just think he's a monster,
Right.
And I talked to him about that. I actually said that to him. I said, I do see I said, it's clear to me that you're having fun and everything like that. And I said, but I see this level of empathy in what you do. And he goes, I wouldn't claim for a second that I don't believe what I say, And he goes, I struggled in the wilderness for a number of years being very unpopular, And he goes, now seems to be my time. And so he's very self-aware, of what's going on. So, yeah, I mean, I guess it's a good platform to dive into all this, like, identity politics stuff. One thing, because you've talked, I did like the fact that on one of your videos you were mocking the idea of people using the word cuck, which I thought was brilliant. Because it's dumb. Because my podcast kind of took a real turn after I spoke with Milo, because it really impacted me. I was like, it sort of changed the whole trajectory of my thinking, and I've kind of ended up, I don't know. I mean, I'm not in America, so the language doesn't completely line up, but I have found myself leaning more conservative and right wing now, and I'm just like, but I don't like all the labeling, because it's like there's no nuance. It's like you're on the left, you're on the right, and so I got in this sort of echo chamber for probably a good 6 months of all these, you'd be aware of it, I'm sure. There's all these videos on YouTube of wrecked feminists, let's own these people, and all this crazy stuff. And it's just I'm getting to this point now. I'm just going, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen, especially now that Trump's in office, because I'm like, now these people essentially have power to a degree, and I'm like. And it's actually one thing, Milo says, actually, he goes, it's always interesting to see what happens when people go through the corridors of power, your character's really tested. And I'm just like, there's only so many ways you can call, a feminist an idiot. You're going to run out of material really quickly, and it's...
Yeah, it's very interesting. I agree. I'm seeing a lot of anger, perpetuated on both sides, but especially the Trump supporters. And it's kind of sad. A week and a half ago or something, Trump tweeted about the inauguration, and he said some tweet about how it was going to be huge crowds and for everybody to have fun. And it popped up in my Twitter feed, and I immediately replied to it offhandedly, and I said, your tweets read like even the sentences in them are battling for the final say. And it wasn't it's not my most clever tweet, but I was like, it was right off the top.
I think it's brilliant.
I got in the shower. Thanks. It was pretty lighthearted. I wasn't calling him Hitler. I wasn't, doing anything like that. I was just saying he tweets like a 9-year-old. And I called that out. I got in the shower and got out. And it had become one of his top replies, which means it got favorited 4,000 times or something like that. And then my timeline just became filled with these Pepe people and these people saying that I was a snowflake liberal and all these things, which I am definitely not. But it was so fun to sort of be on the receiving end of it, and I'm really thankful that it happened, because it was you can start to learn how truly empty these insults are. The number one insult that these conservatives would hit me with was I'm not funny, because they go to my profile, they hover over my name, and they see that I was a host and comedian and writer.
Yeah, they're trying to hurt you. They're just trying to hurt you.
What's that?
They're just trying to hurt you.
Exactly, yeah. And they're trying, and then they would say that they never heard of me, and all this stuff. And I was like, my first thought was you're saying I'm not funny. I'm a comedian. I know I'm not funny. I could hear people not laughing every night in and night out. I will walk into the. I mean, you want to talk about wildernesses? I will walk in and bomb in front of an audience. That will teach you very quickly that you're not the hot shit that you might think you are.
Yeah.
And so it and it's all these you're crying and you're just. And then there's a lot of projection. It's you're just angry because Trump won, and I'm like, is it maybe you are the angry one because Trump won, and now this thing that you have in you that you thought Trump was going to solve immediately or satiate within you isn't satiated, and that you're actually maybe scared as a human being who is in this system that you're in. But I'm seeing all this, and then I start replying to all of them, because they say not to reply to the trolls, but where's the fun?
Yeah.
So I start going after all of these people, and I'm like, yeah, well this and yeah, well that, and I'm like, I'm having a great time. Like this is like so much fun. And then I go after this one dude who's like, he's a big guy and he's got the American flag filter over his avatar, and he's sort of your quintessential like Trump supporter. And I replied to him and I go, look, man, just so you know, I make fun of both liberals and conservatives. And then that gets favorited a bunch. That becomes a prominent reply, and then the liberals start coming after me. So then my timeline is filled with conservatives telling me I'm not funny, and liberals telling me that I should quit and that I am doing a disservice to America and all this stuff. And then it ends. One of the last insults I got was a liberal who told me that hanging was too good for me. That I should be hanged for making fun of both liberals and conservatives. And I was like, look, I'm gonna make fun of both people, because for one, it's twice as many jokes, and I think that if you can make fun of people, then you can make fun of your own opinions, and it allows you to kind of zoom out on what you believe and see it for what it is. And then I talked about a little bit about this in the video, and I also think that it keeps you, most importantly, from having your identity intertwined with like a political ideology. And the danger of that is not the danger of it on the other side. The reason people want that to happen is because they don't want you to be a snowflake and they don't want you to be a fence straddler.
Yeah.
But the danger of being like, this is what I am, and I'm hard and fast pro-Trump, or I'm hard and fast pro-Hillary, or remember her? She was great. But the problem with doing that is it keeps you from the human experience of like being able to talk to a person one-on-one.
Yeah. And
that, I think, is so much more what life is about than these ideas and these stances that we hold. Like, I'm much more interested in why someone and this is why Peter and I get along so well. I would rather talk about why someone clings so tightly to the belief in God or the belief in atheism than what they actually believe. If any of that makes sense. Long diatribe.
No. That's great. I love it. That's what I do find. I almost wanted to bring this up with you because I when I watch your videos, I kind of almost see you as like this mediator type character where you're like, I'm not planting my flag here or here. Like, I'm not going to give you, I'm not going to give anyone the satisfaction. We're just going to keep, like, it seems to me, like
I'm a tease.
Well, no, but I think it almost would come from a value that you're like, you have this conviction about keeping the conversation going. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I would agree with that. Yeah, I appreciate you very kindly articulating that. I'm trying to do that right now. Actually, I'm writing a video about the Muslim ban, and I'm going to do like one part of it's going to put like a red filter on it, and it's going to be me talking about it.
Honestly, I'm scared to even talk about that stuff. Hey, like I spent the last 2 days just like internally wrestling this whole Muslim ban thing. Like I was like, what do I feel about this? I was like, I tend to be a very emotionally driven person by nature, and
good for you.
There was something in my being where I was just like, I don't think this is right. I was like, no, I don't think. Like I just felt like I had no logic behind. I knew that I didn't have logic behind it. I was like, this just doesn't feel right, and I couldn't figure out why. And I was like, I've got a friend who's like pretty hardcore pro-Trump, and we get on really well, and he seems to be able to convince me of a lot, but then I was just like, no, I can't. Like, I can go with Trump on this and this, but I'm like, this one, I just can't. I was like, no, I can't do it. And I sort of, and then I sort of started looking, like, the facts start coming in, and you start actually reading the things that are written and what's actually going on. And I don't know, I had this conversation. It's really funny because I had these, like, diametrically opposed conversations where I've got another friend of mine who's like, really liberal, and I wouldn't call him a social justice warrior because he's not. He's really not. I think he's actually quite similar to yourself. He's a bit of a thinker. He likes philosophy and things like that. And I had this conversation about last night where I was thinking, I was talking about it in the terms of like almost framing it in the concept of family values, like. When you, like, because we talk about these concepts like multiculturalism and like let's all hold hands and be one and everything, but then it's like I had this experience like growing up in the church that I did. I grew up in a pretty small town, and the there was about 5 or 6 sort of prominent churches in the town I grew up in, and something quite unique kind of happened where 3 of the churches like joined together, which generally never happens.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, it was a pretty incredible thing that happened. It was like, because all the like pastors and leaders would like meet once a month, and they were kind of like, hey, let's push for unity, and this thing happened where these 3 churches just came into one, and it was like the merging of these giant families, and you see, like, it inevitably fell apart. Like, it didn't work, because it was like trying to... Oh, yeah. No, but it...
Shocking.
Yeah, who would have known? But it was an interesting thing to go through, because, you know, you see it's like... and even growing up, like, my mum's, like, fostered kids and stuff, so I've seen that side of things where you, like... You realise that you're not just taking on one person. It's like, there's baggage, there's, like... You know, like a value system and
histories, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was trying to frame it in this way, and I was thinking, okay, and I did this experiment. I'll kind of go through it with you as well, because it'll be interesting to hear what you have to say. Where I was like, if you can forget that it's Trump for like 2 seconds, like just blur that out of your head. And I was like, if you've got this kind of patriarchal figure, essentially, like I was thinking of America like this giant family, right? And it's like setting down these values and saying. Because to go back a step, my fear was when I was like feeling this like emotion about it, going, oh, this isn't right. Like, and one of my fears was like, if this concept of resistance, right, where you like, you know, you could be emboldening or you know, causing more people to become radicalized by alienating them. You know, I was like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Like, is it going to get worse because you're drawing this line in the sand, kind of thing? And I was like, yeah. And then I kind of came to this conclusion where I was like, if we buy into this fear, then they've already won. You know, it's like if we think, right. Oh, we can't do this because, oh my gosh, they could do this or they could, you know, it was the same thing. You know, Milo had that example. I mean, in I think it was in Seattle where there was like someone got shot outside of his event. You know, and he got up on stage. So he went back and like found out the details, and he came back out and he's like, yeah, look, this is what we know so far, and blah blah blah. Turns out it was a Trump supporter with a gun, but it was self-defense, and he like handed himself in and everything. They had footage. It was it was kind of interesting, yeah. But he comes out and he goes, they didn't know any of the details. He goes, I don't know if this is a fatality, blah blah blah. And he goes, but here's what I think. I think we need to keep going, because if we don't, we're sending a message that they can stop us. You know, this is when he didn't know the details, right? So he's like, if we keep going, then we're sending a message that violence can stop our free speech and blah, blah, blah. And like, you know, nobody disagreed. He gave them a chance to like respond, and everyone's like, no, good, you know. And it was this conviction kind of thing. And I guess to make the point, I was, you know, just thinking, being this family where the issue comes like, and this is my resistance, I guess, towards this liberalism where it's all like kumbaya, like let's all hold hands kind of thing. It's like, you have to have intelligent conversations about these value systems. Like, if there's 2 competing value systems that like aren't compatible, what can you do? Like, I'm not saying I don't know what the answer is, so don't even ask me. But
totally, yeah, you're totally right. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think,
No. Just to finish the point, like I'm just saying, like we have to. Instead of this kind of like, oh, you agree with this, you're a bigot, you're racist, all the labels like you're racist, you're a bigot, like that doesn't help. And that's why I'm so glad to have a conversation like this, because I'm just like, I want to talk to, you know, not that I think we've disagreed on much so far at all anyway, but, you know, I'm like, it's so important to me to talk with people that see things differently, because I'm like, we need that, you know?
Yeah, I think it's really the labeling thing and all that, and this is just an aside, I think a mentality that helps is just being like, you gotta kind of like know yourself a lot, which is why a lot of the jokes that I make and like the political jokes and all that, it's kind of like trying to be self-deprecating, trying to be like, look, I can be a piece of shit and I can be a racist and a bigot, and I know I can be all these things. I experience it, and I try to curb that behavior and explore that mentality. I was raised in the South, and I have a joke about this in I did a stand-up special in the late 2015 called Premature, and I talked a little bit in the middle about being like, you know, admitting that I'm a little, like, I have racism. Like, I it's like a tiny bit, and I'm not proud of it. It's not something that, it's probably so much more minuscule than even saying that alludes to, like, because the moment you say it, it's like, oh, he's a racist. But it's like, no, like, I deal with with racism. Like, I've been racist.
There's a scale here. There's a scale.
Right. It's like it's so funny because the hyper leftist movement wants to adopt relativism where it suits them, but not where it doesn't. So it's like relativism is really popular when it comes to things and that I agree with, which is things like sexuality and now it's the hot topic is gender, and it's sort of like everything is becoming some version of the Kinsey scale. But then when it comes to vices, it's like, well, that's not a scale. Like you're a bigot, you're Hitler, you're a racist, and it's like you throw these labels on people. And it's like, well, where did that nuance go that you just had when you were talking about these social justice issues? And I'm not saying that I disagree with these social justice issues, but like have a little bit of grace for someone who's coming at it from a different background and a different angle. In terms of the ban and this so-called Muslim ban, and I know I agree entirely with what you're saying. Like this weekend, dude, I basically spent the weekend doing nothing and relaxing, and it was amazing. But every now and then I would sign on to Twitter and just be like, what in God's name is happening right now? And I was like, I had the same thing where I was like, this seems horrible. Like whatever is happening, but it seemed too horrible to be true. And I think that there's the too good to be true mentality, which is like what Trump supporters often have, where he's going to be this sort of magical object who's going to solve everything. And then there's the leftist too good to be true, but their version of the too good to be true is too horrible to be true, which is he becomes Hitler because they thought he was going to be Hitler, so everything he does is Hitler-esque in some way. And so I started looking into it, and like it's a similar thing I imagine, where it's like, like he's not banning Muslims, he's banning people in predominantly Muslim countries. He's operating, and I could totally be wrong, but he's operating off of a list that was created by
I know, I was about to say that. It was created by Obama, yeah, exactly.
And it's like, and I'm not saying that makes right. I'm not saying Saudi Arabia and Pakistan shouldn't be on this list. I also think it's important to note that he's not outright banning people. They're shutting the vetting system down. I think he did it in a horrible way. I don't think green card should have been halted. But it's like, even saying all that, we live in an environment where it's like, if I say that, that's so counter to what I should be doing, especially in the YouTube community, where I should be screenshotting me deleting the Uber app. Like, that's going to do something. And establish, or not going to Starbucks. I almost tweeted today that I took an Uber to grab Starbucks just to piss people off, but, like, I've done enough of that. And here's, like, I go back and forth with things, and as a result, like, of this kind of, post-crisis, walking in the wilderness, and I still am in the wilderness a little bit. Like, I love that terminology that Milo used, because it's one that my therapist has used on a regular basis, where it's like, you go through the wilderness, and then you come out a different person, and that's the whole point of life. But, a result of my going through my version of the wilderness is I can sometimes be so honest, and this sounds like a brag, but what happens is I'm honest in my cynicism, and I'm like, wait a minute, and I'll throw out these little things that are like trying to be wrenches in this well-oiled machine of the leftist movement, and it comes off like I'm only a contrarian, but the reality is I'm a contrarian, like, actually in my head. I go back and forth on this shit all the time. I'm like, well, the Muslim ban is horrible. Yeah. It is racist. We do have an evil man who is the president. And then I go, no, he's a businessman. He's trying his best. The media is, if not lying, hyperbolizing, and, the victims of their own echo chamber. And I'm in my own echo chamber. And I just think if there's going to be a resistance, it should be against our own echo chambers, not against some perceived devil. And not to say that Trump is good. It's just explore what Ben Shapiro is saying or what Milo is saying. You don't have to agree with it, but take a moment and put your own beliefs aside and consume more, instead of just outputting this constant rhetoric that maybe isn't based in facts. Oh, and then one more point, and I'm sorry, this is becoming like
no, this is great. I love it.
We can get back to more of a conversation, I think. But the other thing I was going to say regarding America as a family, I think something that everyone should ask themselves, and something I'm struggling with a lot, is America supposed to act like a person with ethics and morals, or is the government supposed to behave in a way that they are protecting a country, they are strengthening their borders, so that the people within them are safe and have the most amount of freedom possible? And I think that there are two schools of thought, and oftentimes, I'm reading this book right now called Diplomacy by Henry Kissinger, and it talks a lot about this concept called raison d'etat, which was this. It's a French term. It's basically political motives or a political strategy motivated only by what's in the best interests of the country. And it started by a guy named Richelieu, who in France, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, who deviated from the Holy Roman Empire as they were expanding in France in order to protect France. And so the Pope ended up being like, hey, if there's a God, you're going to burn in hell, but if there's not, you're going to be remembered as one of the greatest statesmen that ever lived. And he basically, through rejecting the quote-unquote morals and ethics and operating solely in a way that benefited his country, he helped establish the balance of power in Europe and created this kind of equilibrium through that mentality or through that strategy. And I'm not saying that that's what I think Trump should or is doing, but I think it's worth knowing what you believe on a macro scale. Like, do you think that the government should act in the way that Gandhi said we should act as individuals, or should the government behave in a way that protects its citizens? And I frankly struggle with that regularly. I've never thought about it like that, but that's interesting. I'll have to ponder that before I can respond, because that's pretty deep. But yeah, I guess to push back a little, like you talked about your interaction, say, on Twitter with like alt-right and conservatives or whatever. My experience, being more in that camp, like I don't call myself alt-right, whatever. Sure. You can't. If you do that, you're in big trouble.
Well, I'm trying. I actually reached out to Richard Spencer I'll be, I want to talk to that guy, because why not? I don't agree with probably anything he's saying, but I think
it's an interesting thing, because the rebuttal would be that you're normalizing it. Do that, to give somebody a voice, is to normalize, and I'm like, well, evil's been actually normal throughout human history. We're not gonna do anything new here. But so I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. I had a friend, my lefty kind of friend, when I said about trying to talk to him, he was almost terrified even at the concept. He's like, why would you want to talk to him? I was like, because why not? Like, because I don't, like, again, it's not about agreeing with someone, but it's about going, I want to know how you got to where you are. I'm curious, But my experience with the opposite side of it, when you come to the left and try and interact and challenge their narrative, and I'm totally generalizing, I completely admit that, but what they'll do is just like instantly block. Like I think when Milo was on Twitter, he followed me, and we, like, after I did the podcast, we had some, like, he'd retweet me and I'd blog about him and stuff, and it was like, I was a little fanboy for a while, but and I think just because we followed each other, whatever, I don't know exactly how Twitter works, but I think I was on some like block list, because I would like go to people's pages who I'd never even interacted with, and I was just like instantly blocked. I was like, okay, this is a non-starter.
Oh, really? That's funny. Yeah, I when you followed me, I never noticed anybody, doing that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I definitely see the unfriending thing, the like protecting your echo chamber seems to be very, very important to the left. I wouldn't say that it's not to many people on the right too. I mean, my experience on Twitter is that it's kind of the lowest of the low.
Yeah. Well, I think I almost think
just the worst people.
Yeah, I think it's almost, I'd frame it as like people being offensive versus defensive, right? Like, you typically get like more offensive behavior from the right, because they're like, yeah, we've got, free speech, and we'll fight you, like, come fight us, Whereas the left, typically, from my experience, seems to be like, we're defending our position, this is our ground, like, we believe in, gay marriage, this, that, the other, whatever, like, there's just no question. And again, this is something I want to explore more in my own head, I guess, but this whole concept of values, like conflicting values, where it's like, how do we, is it even possible? I'm like processing as I'm talking. But like, is it even possible for two conflicting value systems to interact? And how do you, and again, this is where I go back to my like Jesus-y language, right? Where I'm like, turn the other cheek, forgive your enemy kind of thing. Like, and I think of it that kind of that third way, where it's like, it's not one or the other. It's not about being left or right. It's like it is about love, and you see. On when you, I'm a big believer in this idea. Like, you can't legislate love, right? It's like, okay, gay marriage gets passed in America across the board. You're still going to have homophobia, right? Like, you're still going to have. You can't.
Well, that's shocking to people. Like, anytime that there's like racism or homophobia, you get like it's 2017 and still da 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 da, and it's like. It's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
People are terrible.
Well, I had to wrestle with that. I mean, I brought that up with Milo as well, where I was like, he seems to be, like, come around to the whole thing, of late. But, there was interviews with... there was actually an interview with him and with Boy George on this UK panel show. And they were, like, debating gay marriage. And he's sitting there as a gay person going, I don't think this is the best idea for society. I think we need to talk about it. Like... And it makes you step back and go, okay, maybe I haven't got all the details here. Like, and again, it's this identity politics, which is like, it treats like all gay people like they think the same, or all black people like they think the same. And that to me is like more racist and bigoted than anything else. Like, just to treat people like they're this monolith where it's like they're all one,
Yeah. I agree.
Nuts.
I mean, I think it goes... There's a lack of like looking in the mirror that happens on both sides, but it's difficult to break through that and to like if you think about just like whether it's the Muslim ban or something, and then you see the protests, and then you see the protests with the signs and all this. It's like a contest for who can come up with the most clever sign.
Did you see some of the signs at the Women's March, by the way?
Some of the really just dumb ones? Or
just ridiculous. Like, I made some memes out of some of them because I thought they were so hilarious. I just made myself laugh for like hours.
It's insane. Like, it becomes this thing where it's like, it's this postmodern kind of like, so everything is hyper ironic and hyper self-aware.
Yeah.
And so it's like, where if you're truly enraged and you're truly passionate, I get skeptical about how deep these convictions go when your signs are like what are you doing this for? Are you deleting Uber so you cannot give your money to Uber, or are you deleting Uber so you can take a photo of you deleting Uber? Are you trying to signal to other people that you've deleted Uber? Like, if you delete Uber and you don't tell people you've deleted Uber, did you really delete Uber?
Yeah.
And if you delete Uber on your phone that was made with metal that comes from a slave trade in the Republic of Congo, are you contributing to slavery by not contributing to the Muslim ban? And if so, do you care more about Muslim immigrants than you do about slaves that that are impoverished on the other side of the world? Like, if you go down the rabbit hole of convictions, you can lose your mind pretty quickly. So in terms of like conflicting values, I think we all hold conflicting values.
Yeah.
And it's the struggle. It's much easier for people to take a test or to take a litmus test and check off, I am not homophobic and I'm not racist and I'm not bigoted. It's much more difficult to go, okay, you know what, actually, I'm not sure where I stand when it comes to legislating against this, and I'm not sure where I stand when it comes to the government protecting its citizens against countries that have been deemed, more dangerous than others, and to exist in that space, because it's like above everything is a pressure to know exactly what you believe and why you believe it. And it's oftentimes, I think, the resistance is to go like, actually, no, I don't know. Like, I will listen to what you're saying, and I will point out hypocrisies that I see, and I will be try to be just as honest in my own hypocrisies, but I will not enter into this idea that I've got it figured out and that I'm somehow with you, or that you can group me in. And if that makes you reject me, then that's fine. I'll exist out here kind of doing my thing.
Yeah.
And it's lonely.
Do you think...
It's definitely, like, when I was telling people, they were like, why are you, and this was just on Twitter, and they were like, why do you make fun of both the left and the right? And I was like, I think somebody said that my not picking a side, or my making fun of both liberals and conservatives, is my way of not alienating people. And the reality is that there is no faster way to alienate everybody than to not stand with either side. Like, that pisses people off.
You alienate yourself.
exactly. Yeah, I'm literally going like I don't. And it's very just professionally speaking, it's very difficult. Like I would love to have the equivalent of the Daily Show or the equivalent of well, that would be it. But I can't because it's like it's very difficult to brand a show with with like intellectual, like, yeah, I'll talk to anybody and I don't know and I'm not going to be your expert, because people want that voice and they want that megaphone.
Yeah. Do you think, as a comedian, do you think that, like, because I've noticed a lot of, like, you know, you see the odd sketches on, like, SNL or whatever, just, like, having a go at Trump and stuff like that. A lot of it just seems to be, it comes from this place of, like, it gets preachy. It's just, like, the whole message is just, like, Trump sucks, you know? And it just gets boring to me. You know, I'm just like, does there need to be, like, this evolution in some ways? Like, do we need to get more creative?
I think we do. I mean, I think it's there, though. I think, I think it's starting to happen. And I think, like, even with SNL, Colin Jost, after the election, made a joke on Weekend Update, and that's, like, my dream, you know, position, basically, is Weekend Update, because it's such I think, such a powerful little segment in a show that happens on Saturday night. But he did a joke where he said that Tinder has introduced 37 different gender options on their app, or as it's otherwise known, why the Democrats lost the election. And I thought it was a funny joke, but a well-written joke. But beyond that, it was a jab at those sort of leftist mentality, and it was a jab at, you know, people sort of took that to mean that he was blaming transgender people for the election, which just shows how, in my opinion, myopic their view is. Because in my opinion, and I think it's a right opinion, is that joke signifies how this sort of identity politics and political correctness has driven people away from what they're trying to do, which was, you know, equality. And so in moments like that, I'm like, yes, like Colin Jost came under fire and all this stuff. And I was like, man, this is what we need. We need people who are going to, even if you don't find it funny, even if you're offended by it, you know, support the comedy, support jokes, because that's what's going to allow you, that little discomfort you feel in being offended may not be the worst thing. Like, being offended, I don't think, is a totally non-productive experience. At least it doesn't have to be.
Well, being offended being offended has become an argument now. Like, I'm offended, like that means anything.
Oh yeah, that's the what's it, Stephen Fry's quote. Yeah, it's said like an argument when it doesn't mean anything. It's an emotion, and if you know, and I that said, it's difficult to make an arguments where you're like, you know, it's like, well, your opinion, your emotions don't matter. It's like, well, your emotions do matter, and the right, you know, it's like these people that the Pepe memes, it happens with them too, you know, with these little frogs in their usernames. They're some of the most emotional people on Twitter, and they come at you with this, you know, immediate rhetoric, this immediate line of defense that they've constructed to make their worldview make sense. And sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're wrong, and that's kind of where I've had this. Yeah, like I've had this question in me, like burning in me for a while with this whole conversation I've been a part of, like left versus right and all this identity politics, and I've talked about it on the podcast. This whole idea of like this question of intelligence. It seems like I kind of think of it like intelligence versus empathy, right? Like, you've got facts versus feelings, you know, like people like Milo or Ben Shapiro, like, they're just all about the facts, like facts, you know, and then you got people on the left going, oh, don't hurt our feelings, don't hurt this person, you've offended this person, like, and that's kind of what it seems like to me. It's just like, yeah, good point.
Yeah, and it's, you know, like, I often use this example. I've talked to a few people about this, but like, it's a good example because I think it clearly says what I'm trying to say. But you know, you would have seen the movie The Green Mile, right?
A long time ago,
yeah.
So you'd have to...
Yeah, no, there's just, like, the whole setup where, you know, there was the guy, I just don't say the big black guy, whatever, you know, he gets put in prison.
Rames, I think?
Yeah. Take my hand, boss.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, like, he gets put in prison for they charge him with killing these two twin girls, right? And it turned out that it was the other guy in the cell opposite him he was the killer. And it flashes back to the scene where he's kidnapped these two girls, and he says to one of them, if you don't shut up, I'll kill your sister. And then he turns to the other one and he says the same thing, if you don't shut up, I'll kill your sister. And the guy's talking about it to Tom Hanks, and he goes, he used their love for one another against them.
Yeah.
And I just think that illustrates it so perfectly, where I think this is, because I do believe most people who are liberal on the left, who maybe hold these really out there weird identity politics that I think are ridiculous, personally, I don't think they're bad people. I don't think they're evil or vindictive. I think some of the people leading these movements, and maybe some of the journalists pushing the narrative, I think maybe are not so nice people. But I think that's what seems to be happening, that people's empathy and love is kind of being hijacked and utilized. It becomes utilitarian, and there's all kinds of things that get mixed up with economics and people, political power, and it's crazy. It just gets.
Are you familiar with Scott Adams?
No.
So Scott Adams, first of all, speaking of empathy, I hope people have empathy for the fact that I confused Bing Rames with Michael Clark Duncan, or Michael Clark Bing Rames, because that's definitely, if that's not a glaring, obviously racist moment of my own.
It's alright, I just said big black guy. So.
Big black guy, that must be Bing Rames. Yeah, no, it's Michael Clark Duncan. But, and I only know that because I Googled it, because it didn't seem right. But anyway, Scott Adams was one of my favorite people to follow during the election, because he's a hypnotist, and he's a little insane, but in March I did a video where I said why Donald Trump was going to be the next president. It was before he won the primary, and it was before, obviously, he won the general. And I went back and forth on it internally, but I was like, I still think this guy's going to win, because he's more charismatic than anybody on the political landscape at that time. And the only other person I thought that could have beat him would have been Bernie Sanders, but then the DNC kind of colluded and made that not happen.
We kind of screwed that one up.
He did, for all intents and purposes, he didn't get the nomination. But he talks a lot, Scott Adams talks a lot about the different filters that people kind of use to view the world. And he has sort of crazy ideas that I sometimes subscribe to, which is that, we may be living in a virtual reality and all that kind of stuff. And it's really fun to read his blog. He's the creator of Dilbert, by the way. I don't know if you're familiar with Dilbert.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But he gets a lot of flack, but he's been doing these blog posts recently that are really pinpointing how it doesn't, the facts are different. Everybody makes fun of alternative facts, but that's exactly I thought that was a perfect term for what we are experiencing. If I on my Twitter timeline can experience an entirely different world than my Facebook timeline, where it's more filled with my family back home and more conservative and more more just working class, and it's so fascinating. And it basically boils down to a lot of confirmation bias and a lot of you have to be willing to weed through so much of this bullshit, because and then after you weed through all the bullshit, you then have to look at yourself and be what are my biases? Where am I coming from? Why do I get offended at somebody who maybe is a Republican? Is it because they represent the kind of evangelical Christianity that I don't have a good taste in my mouth for? Is that when a Christian is staunchly anti whatever or pro whatever, do I have a tendency to reject what they're saying because I've had some bad experiences with organized religion? And then how much is that clogging my perception of reality? And then I think the only logical conclusion is, and this is probably the most insane sounding thing, but I think we can't know. There is, reality has become, thanks to the internet, a very strange place where we can't really know what's going on, and we just have to do our best.
What's funny when you say that, because I immediately see a silver lining to that, because I'm I think it's great, because what I hope it does, maybe it won't, but what it should do is kind of push us back into reality. Like, go talk to someone face to face. You know what I mean? Like, go have an actual conversation. Like, and that's why I think it's funny, even with the rise of popularity in podcasting. Over the last few years, it's like we have all this technology, and yet like the good old fashioned human conversation is like winning the day. It's pretty fascinating.
I hope so. I hope you're right. I mean, I'm shockingly a tiny bit more cynical. By the way, I apologize to anybody listening to this who was expecting a comedian.
Maybe I shouldn't have called you a comedian at all.
Being like,
lower expectations.
Yeah, there's no hope. You can't know anything. But yeah, I hope it goes toward conversations. And that's my goal is to first have people hold up a mirror to themselves and then have them bring that humility to the conversations they're having. Yeah. Rather than this tribalism that seems to be like so prevalent.
I just saw, I know you're a fan of Dave Rubin as well. He just had a bishop on his latest episode.
A bishop?
Yeah.
Dude, I love Dave. I'm going to be on his show whether he likes it or not. I'm just going to storm into the studio and be like, you're going to talk to me about my opinions, and I'm going to tell you stuff. But the thing is, I'm not like an expert on anything, so I just have to like fake it. I mean, I could probably talk about political correctness and comedy and all that. I'm just like, I gotta read a couple more books before I can. Yeah. I wonder, because he invites like mathematicians on and stuff, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. One of the things, like, you sort of brought the conversation back around to this, like, internalizing and looking within, and I think it's such a great place to kind of land, because, we seem to, there's this quote I love, it says, if you look at anyone like he's the devil, you'll never understand his motives, Like,
oh, great, that's great. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And, like, there seems to be this scapegoating thing, especially in America right now with Trump. It's like, he's the devil, he's literally Hitler, blah, blah, blah. Like, if you can locate evil outside of yourself, you never have to... You can justify never self-reflecting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's what needs to change. And that's why I'm so, so keen to just keep talking to different people and having these conversations. Because I think, like, it's so important,
bringing it back to Peter a little bit, Rollins, not not Peter Pan, but the horrible joke. The idea of
that was low energy, as Trump would say.
Yeah, low, terrible. The horrible impression as well. I'm batting 0 for. See, and that's not even a good sports reference. I don't know enough about sports to make a good sports reference. It's terrible. Get back to the serious stuff. The idea is the beautiful soul idea. I forget who did it. Let me see if I can. It was I don't know if it was Hegel or something like that, but it was this idea that because people are so scared to confront their internal whether it's fears or desires or whatever.
Well, he talks about being haunted houses, that language of ghosts, where there's all ghosts within us and all that sort of stuff. I love that kind of language.
Yeah, and it's what's funny is you see these people who are like, it's Lacan, Lacan, and then Hegel, but it's the idea that that person is evil, and if that person is evil, you're a beautiful soul, and you're not, and it takes a little bit more time, and it's a little uglier to be like, oh, I'm actually not a beautiful soul. I actually screw up on a regular basis. I'm actually limited in my intelligence. Yeah. I'm limited in my my morality and in my ability to empathize with people. Like, that's what talking about how the iPhones are built by slaves and my clothes are built in sweatshops and like all these things. Like, I don't have the ability to empathize or even the desire to empathize with all of the atrocities that I personally indirectly contribute to. And knowing that, I take that and I apply it to these other situations. And I'm not saying not to be passionate about things, but at least know, like, you're not, like, we're not that great. Yeah. And I was like, I wrote, recently, I believe, I have a very low opinion of humans, and that comes across very cynically, but then I have a very high opinion of, like, the human being's potential, because we're the only people that can, like, we're the only species, we're the only anything, especially, like, a lot of, the more kind of evolved human beings, we can talk about things fairly and with grace and love, and we can understand where people are coming from, and we can also just on a more basic level experience love, and we can experience like unity and like triumph and like self-actualization and all of these things. So there is the potential for greatness in the human experience, but you have to pass through the wilderness and willingly
you can't
leave your echo chambers in order for that to happen.
You can't skip the process. I think everybody wants the result but not the journey, like the suffering. And I think there seems to be two ways to motivate people. Like, you can operate out of a framework of like shaming people, and that's what a lot of people seem to do, especially on the left, where it's like, oh, if you don't believe this or this, then you're racist, sexist, bigoted, whatever. Like, it's shameful.
You thought it was being Rams when it was Michael Clark Duncan.
Yeah, it's like shaming language, right? And that can be like a short-lived motivator. Like, people can motivate people through shame to a point, but then what I would say in my experience is the lasting, like, internal thing that is real genuine is when you actually suffer. Like, suffering evokes empathy, and like, in my own journey I can say that, like, I've come from this place of like feeling like I had all the answers and my world was really black and white and simple, and then I suffered, right? I went through these traumatic experiences and had to like rebuild and I think, and you've talked about that as well, like, I'm sure, like, going through a divorce is, I'm sure that you'd equate that to suffering on some level, right? And you crumble.
A couple.
Yeah. It's like out of my league. That's not. But what I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think we need to like honor our own human story and learn to, like, kind of. It sounds kind of cheesy, but like, go easy on ourselves sometimes, because I think, like, you're really self-deprecating, and so am I, and I that's why I resonate with you, quite honestly. But at the same time, we have to cut ourselves some slack and go, because I've had this belief, like, for a long time, that you're never going to treat people better than you treat yourself. Like, I always, whenever somebody's like you talked about the example, I watched one of your videos, and you talked about basically the example of that lady that went crazy at you when you were like moving out of that parking space or whatever. And, she went from like 0 to 100 in like 2 seconds or whatever, just like instantly raging, right? And you kind of got to think, what's your response going to be? And your response was brilliant. Just like, hey, sorry about that, have a nice day, or whatever.
And then she got very upset at that because she was convinced that wasn't how things went down. Yeah. And I was like, oh man, she probably, like, in her world really thought that, like, I was this horrible person and, like, was being a smug, asshole, which I probably came off that way, but it was my version of being nice. It's all about perception. But I agree with what you're saying. It's
like colliding narratives there. It's just like her story versus your story. It's just like these two don't fit together, But we have to honor our own human story and where we've come from. And, one thing, especially, like, one thing I've noticed in these kind of, like, especially, like, liberal, progressive, church, like, emergent church type circles, there seems to be this, like, there can be, from my experience, a certain level of like smugness where it's like, oh, I'm not one of these like mainstream evangelicals, like I'm past that, And
oh my god, it's so annoying.
Yeah, and I talked to Brian McLaren about this. He's one of the like head figures of emergent Christianity, and he totally concurred. Like, he's like, I see it as well, And
it's awful. I've gone back. I mean, I've been critical on Twitter of a lot of these people that are coming out that were so on the cutting edge of being like, we're not fundamentalist Christians, we're welcoming straight into identity politics.
It becomes a new type. It just becomes a new type of fundamentalism, essentially. And I think
absolutely.
And that's the thing. I think that you can only be responsible for your own values at the end of the day, and where how you operate with the world, and you can't, like I was saying earlier, you can never enforce that on someone else. Like, it's like putting this conversation out into the world. Like, we can put it out and people can choose to listen or not. Like, it's like, do what you want, right? Like, we're not forcing.
Fortunately, we're just like two people being like, yeah, exactly. yeah, I agree.
We haven't, I'm trying to rack my brain here. I'm just like, we haven't really disagreed on anything. I'm just like, Where do we let's have a fight?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have the there's plenty that people do come at me on. It's you were mentioning like the shame thing and like how that's a bad way to get people to change their minds, and it's like there's no group of people in like westernized culture today that knows that better than people who have left the evangelical church in some way. Like, we know the end. Like, spoiler alert, we know what happens when you tell people that they're unworthy or that they're that they're evil or something like that. It will lead to them either making decisions to appease people which aren't real and don't confront the problem at hand, or it will lead them to go in the opposite direction, or it'll lead them to ignoring you, which is what's happened to a lot of in the evangelical church. Like, I do believe all of this stuff is related, and you can see threads of it throughout these subcultures. Like American Christianity is in the toilet right now, at least from my understanding. Yeah. Especially with young people just leaving in droves, and it's because they realize, or they should be realizing now, that the model doesn't work, and they're trying to adjust the model and become these kind of like, you know, like these hipper, like, oh, we're non-denominational. Like, I think that was like, I think it was like 10 years ago that was like a really hip thing. Like, all the churches now are non-denominational. It's like they thought that like they could get people back if their inclusivity, you know, only went so far as denominations. Like, who gives a crap if you're Baptist or Pentecostal? But for them, that was a big step. And it's like, it's not. I mean, it's also just like the coffee shop churches where it's like everything is, you know, a small group and everything is, and that's going back to the religious stuff. But you see that with on the political spectrum. It's like, you know, where are the people, you know, where are your friends and where are your enemies, and why can't we all just get along and be kumbaya? And I just completely lost any track of what I was saying.
No, that's great. I think we'll maybe wrap up. I was just thinking, just in closing, like, just to maybe leave people with some things to ponder. There's this quote that I love. I'm not sure who said it, but it basically says something along the lines of, it strikes us when year after year the longed for perfection never arrives. You know? And it's this thing where we have this ideal in our mind, like, this is where I should be and this is where I am, and there's like a chasm between those 2 points. And I guess, if anything, I'd like to leave people with is just to say, hey, like, give yourself some space. Like, this life is a journey, right? Like, we're all working it out, whether you consider yourself on the left, on the right, whatever. Like, we're all human. We all bleed, as Peter Rollins would say.
Well, and I mean, not to come off like a disciple of Peter Rollins, because
who cares?
I've seen him at his not as lowest. I've seen his lowest at all, but he talks about references a guy named Camus a lot, and Camus talks about the difference between the revolutionary and the conservative, and the revolutionary is the one who says, like, kind of the liberal mindset, which is that we can achieve utopia if we just X, Y, and Z, and the conservative says, no, utopia is behind us. We can get back to there if we just X, Y, and Z. And
hence, make America great again.
Say what?
Make America great again, right? That's the slogan.
Exactly. We can make America again, because it already was. That's where the goodness was. And then the liberal says, no, we were just getting there. You're peeling us back. But there is the rebel, which exists between the revolutionary and the conservative, who delights in the limitations and fights for equality, but knows that the utopia will never come, and spends their lives self-aware, but continues to, like, delight in the fact that that there's no complete answer. And that, I think, is what I love, and that's how I think more people should. For me, personally speaking, that's been the closest thing to, like, a conviction or a value that has held true in personal and political and, like, any kind of arena, I guess. Yeah.
I guess just a closing question in that sort of vein of thinking. In your, like, interactions with people online with all these conversations, what have you found, like, just practically speaking, maybe, like, in different kind of, even in real life conversations is maybe a better example, but, like, what works in your opinion and what doesn't work when you're, like, interacting with different ideologies, kind of thing?
I wish people, I kind of wish I got more, like, hate from social justice people. It's like I'm, like, insulted by the amount that I get. Every now and then I'll get somebody who's like, Elliott's a privileged bigot and all that, and I'm like, yeah, I got one.
I can help you with this, by the way.
Okay, great, yeah, send them my way, because I have a blast. I realized that too when the Trump debacle was going down, and it was like this torrential downpour of hatred from both sides, and I kept going back and forth. I was like, they say not to respond to the trolls, but I'm going to do it anyway. And then I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
I'm the troll. Like I'm so much worse because they're coming at me like they're calling me a slur for a homosexual, which I prefer not to say.
Yeah.
Not because it's politically incorrect, but because I don't like to say it. But like this guy's like DMing me, and he's like, "You're a," and I just responded. I'm like, "What do you mean by that?" Like, and I'm trying to egg these people on, and they're trying to egg me on, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm like the troll that happens at the end of the level. Like I'm like like in Mario, the monster at the end." But
here's what you should do. I think what you should do is make 2 separate YouTube videos, and just stereotypically like trigger each category, right? Like just like script it out where you're making one to just go against the social justice bros, and then one to just like. And just release them both like simultaneously just to confuse people.
Yeah, and then I can send that video to my agents and be like, so should you let me go or should I just go ahead and quit my day job? My career is over, right? We're done here. But yeah, no, that's funny you say that. I was going to do something like that in this Muslim band video where I like filtered it in a red color and then filtered it in a blue color to kind of go back and forth, but to show how the information is different. But in terms of like interacting with people, I think my experience is that people typically just want to talk about what they believe, and if you know what you believe and you know that it may or may not differ and you don't need them to believe what you believe, then it's a lot easier just to be like, why do you believe that? Like, where does that idea come from? Do you like, in what circumstances have you seen these things be true or not true? And like, where did you grow up? Were your parents? I think a lot of it is were your parents liberal or conservative, because that's kind of the psychoanalytic side of it, and the Freudian, like, do you believe this because you're getting back at your mom and dad? And like just continually asking, and then I think regardless of where the conversation goes, I think that type of line of questioning and just being like, where does this come from? Like really explore it, and if they ask you, be totally honest. But I feel like that's stuff that sticks with people and makes them go like, why do I think this? Like, where did this statistic that I spout come from? And I think that's a better way to approach it than like the desire to change someone.
Yeah. Awesome. This has been such a cool conversation. I feel like I could talk to you all day. I hope
it wasn't too serious. I apologize.
No. I was very deliberate about what kind of conversation I wanted to have. I did want to pick your brain on some pretty serious things, to be honest. I didn't want to just bring you in like a trained monkey and just like make us laugh,
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't be able to do that anyway. I love it. Like, you're a comedian, tell the joke. And I'm like, well, where's the microphone and the lights? And I usually prepare the jokes beforehand.
Well, I'd love to do this again, so maybe next time we can be a bit more lighthearted and whatnot. But do you want to just give out, what are your, like, where can people find you? What's your social media, like your Twitter and
whatnot? My Twitter is Elliott C. Morgan, which is 2 L's and 2 T's. And then everything else is, and then it's facebook.com/Elliott C. Morgan. I am pretentious, but the reason the C is in there is because Elliott Morgan was taken. But it's Elliott C. Morgan on Facebook and Twitter, and then it's Elliott Morgan on Instagram. And it's, if you want some self-deprecation, my username on Snapchat is Elliott Sucks. And my YouTube channel is Elliott Morgan.
Oh, nice.
Nice, yeah. Very clever, very creative.
Awesome. No, that's cool. Well, thank you so much. That was amazing.
Dude, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Cool.